In this episode, I show you what it takes to take an idea and turn it into a story for your D&D games. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, and share this episode with a friend if you'd be so kind. My name is GM Smudge, and welcome to the Smudgecast. What's up, everyone, whenever or wherever you are, and I want to process how to take an idea as a player or a GM you have for your story, mainly for GMs writing a campaign or a session, etc., and actually turning that idea into a story that you can enjoy this week or this month or whenever you're going to play D&D again. And if you haven't, I'd really encourage you to go listen to episode 7 in partnership with this, because those 6 questions that we talk through will be another method to turning ideas into stories. So if you want to go pause this, go to episode 7, or after this one, go listen. It's going to be helpful to you. But the problem that I've seen myself as a player and GM, and I wonder if this actually is for you as well, is that I can have such a cool idea for a game, for a story, a session, campaign, even for my character or a backstory, and then really don't know how to take it and build out a full, immersive, and really fun story to play. Or, maybe for you, it's like we think that, our stories, are amazing because we've got all the characters in the room, we've got the time set, we've got dice, and we've got 3 hours free. Just because we have that doesn't mean that our ideas for the story is actually a good story, experiential, or gonna be something that we are gonna have memories from in a positive way. But for me, that's why this is my mission, to help GMs and players put to practice good storytelling in our D&D games, because at the end of the day, and again, I'm sorry if you disagree, and that's totally cool. We can all have disagreements, and I think that's what even makes this community really fun, is that I think that rules and I think the mechanics don't provide exciting memories. I think they're just really healthy laws. I think they're a really healthy base and a foundation to actually play a game, right? But the skill for D&D is becoming a storyteller. So it's important for us to actually learn that and then reap the immersive and awesome adventurous memories in our games. So once again, this does take time. This does take energy. I even had a phone call with a friend today, and we were talking through this exact thing about how they want to really limit the amount of time that they have, or with the limited time that they have, they want to do stuff, but it's like, it feels like there's not enough time to write and to build out a really immersive story. And it's somewhat true. I think, we do need that time. We do need the energy. We do need that effort on both sides, GMs and players, a care, an excitement to come, to the table and to develop a story with one another. And honestly, in my opinion, within this, it's not anything that's really going to kill us, right? And if we don't feel like we're good storytellers for whatever reason, or if we're new to D&D or just new to this in general, don't worry, because in this podcast right now, we're going to practically walk through an idea and actually turn it into a story together. But first, I really want to give us a couple simple ideas practically on how to take your ideas, jotting them down, and making sense of them. I myself, I wish I would have started writing things down in a way that I could go back to for memory, or use as a means to add or to take away from when I'm processing story. But, shoulda, coulda, woulda. But here are just a couple ways that we can do that, and just even start developing spaces where we can put our ideas and go back to them. Or even really developing a story and an idea. One way is that you can start mind mapping, which is to take your idea, write it down, and then write words around it that come to mind, which allows for creative writing and building a story. I mean, I'll often do this in the beginning of a campaign. I'll write down emotions, genres, overall different words that come to mind when when I'm first sitting down and writing something. And I'll go left to right, literally within the idea, and go through each verb that comes to mind as well. So that's one way you can do some mind mapping. Another way is that you can list out and write down everything that you might think is going to happen in the story. I think the key is to keep going after you think that you've run out of ideas. Force your brain to keep going, even if it starts, getting ridiculous. Chances are you'll push through in that crazy into something that's really good. And like I said, I do both of these methods. And I use a note taking software called Notion. And that's way more for creative note taking with art. And you can add and indexing all your pages and ideas, etc. More to come on this. But once I started saving all my ideas, it's like my personal vault of inspiration, so to speak, I use for myself. But once again, your story is only limited if you're not able to answer the question why, which is exactly the reason why I think some of our stories fall flat is because we don't know why we're doing what we're doing. We don't know why we're telling certain stories. It's just because, X, Y, Z. But I think even right now, this is a perfect practice that we'll go through each step here, throw in a couple whys to turn that idea into a story. I think another problem that I've experienced is that I use the first idea that comes to mind, which isn't wrong, and you might be the same way, but I think it may be lacking overall. When I think about stories, it's comprised of choices, and even then, your first idea for your D&D story, your first choice for your character or for the story might be a good one, but keep thinking of ideas because they might allow for a better choice, a better story in the end. But before we do any of this, we need to understand the nature of ideas and the nature of stories. And maybe this is a little redundant, but an idea is not a story. An idea is unfiltered, a narrow concept that usually doesn't even have any verbs to it. Usually it's its own independent clause or statement that has no merit really, but it does give us excitement for what could be. So you have an idea and you're super excited about it, and maybe in your head you've created the story already, which is awesome, but until you write it down, until you solidify it, it's just an idea floating in the ether of you, so to speak. But let's start putting this practice ourselves. Here's an idea for a campaign, super random. I was thinking about this, like a group of people that have been called to do some undercover espionage in a kingdom. Okay, like we can't just jump into a session and begin. There are too many issues and unanswered questions, which again is the very nature of an idea versus a story. Even the question why needs to be answered. Why do these people need to spy on a kingdom? And it can't be, well, it's because it's D&D. We're playing D&D, Yeah, but let's try to figure out how this is going to work. And I think it boils down to this concept that I have it makes sense in my head, and I've seen it played out, and a justification on not answering the why is don't use the genre of fantasy as a cop-out for bad storytelling. Don't use fantasy just because it's mystical or it's whimsical or it's chaotic and crazy as a means of justifying something that you don't have an answer for. And just because you don't have that answer, you say, oh, because it's magic, it's fantasy. Well, just don't do that, because it actually provides an uninteresting consequence to whatever is happening. So let's just do this. Let's just do some mind mapping here for practice, and I think it's going to be fun to walk through right even now as we go from left to right within this specific idea. So what do we think of with this idea? A group of people being called to do some undercover espionage in the kingdom. Again, I'm going to go left to right. I think of the people. Maybe they're, just like random heroes. What if they're like a jailed villains, like a Suicide Squad type of situation? Or what if they're part of the city itself? The part that says they're called to do something. How is that even happening? Is it a letter? Is it a government threat? Is it a vision? Is it I don't know, maybe like a dream of sorts? When it comes to the spying, undercover espionage stuff, I'm automatically thinking of like Mission Impossible, or like a rope dropping down and you're gonna grab a crown. I think of like parkour elements. I think of a stealthy underground, ops moment where you're looking up through the hole from above and you're seeing two people talking. You're listening in. And I think of the kingdom, right? It's like a dreary, dark kingdom, or it could be maybe joyfully lying to itself in some way. I don't know. You see what I'm doing here? I'm like throwing out different concepts, these different ideas, even emotions. Maybe it's like this whole city is very whimsical and very like jovial and exciting, or maybe it's super dreary and dark. The genre, what if it's like some sort of sci-fi city and it's like in the future, right? And then some descriptive words, like I said, is chaotic, exciting, phantasmal, whatever it is. But the big question here is why? Why are the adventurers being called to spy on a kingdom? Again, maybe it's because the kingdom is on lockdown, and they're they're trying to keep the people from leaving, and the people that are living there don't know that they're being kept there, against their will. So we have some generic ideas here that are tagging to the main idea. We're answering why a little bit more here, and we're solidifying the overall potential of the story. So let's dive into what's called now an inciting event. Now, this is different than the main conflict or the problem or the big bad of the story. I'm talking about what ignites the flame initially. Like the inciting event is sometimes happens to trigger a change or to spark the characters, the protagonist to take action. I was thinking of Harry when he gets his invitation to attend Hogwarts, right? Or when Frodo is given the ring by Bilbo. You see what I'm saying here? And it should be right away. Even in our D&D games, our stories are a lot like movies, or honestly, they kind of should be a lot like movies because that's what we're really used to seeing and visualizing as we come to the table, truly. I mean, we do with books and TV shows, but I think movies hit home a little bit more with us in our culture as well. But I think of the examples like Star Wars. In the very beginning of the first scene, it's like a huge ship shooting at a smaller ship. We're thrown right into the middle of it as an audience. We're not the first scene is Darth Vader saying, "Hi, I'm Darth Vader." And it's no, that's not how it's we are in the middle of it. And this is our games. Our ideas need to allow for this inciting event quickly to justify the idea and make a marker for the story to begin. And without that, I think the idea is meaningless, and I think the story can be meaningless, especially if it just takes multiple sessions to even get to. It becomes way too long. And the way that I make this work is I make this session one, like I said, this specific event, and I don't play games in waiting. I'll even make it the first scene after all the players have described their characters, the inciting event. So our big idea here is spying on a kingdom. People are spying on a kingdom. Why? Because the people are, what do we say? The people are held captive. And what's the inciting event? It could be the party getting the invitation to go on the quest. And boom, done. Easy stuff right there. Well, no, the question becomes how do they get invited? Is it that mail letter like we were saying? Is it a secret ops mission? Or what if they were in the city already? And they didn't know, and they were held captive, and it was someone from outside the city that was part of this underground or this organization network, whatever, that tells them that they're in danger, or what if they're shopkeepers that are, just generic shopkeepers that live around the capital, and since they live around that capital, they have an easier access to an underground cellar to go inside and to do some spy work. What we're doing here is just layering in ideas to make the story. And already, I think we do have some cool concepts to play with, even though they're probably crazy and just kind of very loose and strange and, not detailed. But I think we have something to play with. And I think a pro tip on this is that the longer you wait for your event, similar to what I was saying before, the slower buy-in the players will have. But the faster the inciting event happens, the faster the buy-in is and the more excitement there will be. So we have an idea now. We have an inciting event, a bit, or at least some options. It now allows what's for the main obstacle or a series of obstacles that the player needs to solve before the end. And I do feel like a broken record sometimes because I'm constantly talking about this. A story is only a story if a character or group of characters have an obstacle in front of them. And what they do in the face of the conflict is the story, right? So this is maybe, the main anchor in creating your story is what's the obstacle at hand. So obstacles or even reversals, like plot twists and so to speak, hinge upon the protagonist trying to achieve their goals and trying and maybe even mostly failing because of dice rolls and characters' decisions, etc. All to make the changes that the inciting event made inevitable. Truly, look at it this way. It's like Harry Potter, again, if you don't watch Harry Potter, whatever, but he struggles to fit in Hogwarts. He learns how to use his magic. He's trying to protect his friends, to do what's right, and try to stay out of trouble. So right there, that's a bunch of different obstacles that lean under the same sort of overarching main obstacle. So even there are various types of obstacles, physically, emotionally, mentally, relationally, maybe even spiritually, depending on the character and their backstory. I think these obstacles can be external or internal for the characters as well. However, I would say nail down the main essential obstacle or problem and then bridge out how that obstacle needs to be divided, if any, or if needed at all. So let's take what we have again for our idea. We have a group of regular people that live in the city. They've been told that they are being held captive in the city without them realizing it. Because again, what if people don't leave the city ever now? Which again is we kind of say out loud is kind of weird, so it may not make sense. But maybe there's some brainwashing here, which could be another story element to think through. But these people get invited, the characters, to participate in spying on the capital during maybe a specific event, which will begin the campaign. And now they have to think of the main obstacle being that maybe the party realizes that they can't leave, right? And then at some point, maybe it's like a massive dome covers the city and blocks out the sun and any light in the city, right? And so now they have to juggle trying to do anything and all things with no light. Again, these are crazy thoughts. But, and what, the main antagonist could be doing is trying to release a toxin that makes them all turn undead, or maybe it puts them in a trance to do whatever the capital wants for them. I don't know, and put them in a sleep. You see how crazy? Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just crazy here and how my mind can get. But I think the bunny trails of these ideas that we can use can be so interesting. Maybe you don't use any of them, but I think it's just helpful to get the story going. And maybe you sit on it for a day, or maybe you talk to a friend and they're like, "What is this?" And then you go, "Okay, cool. Well, I'll keep working on it." But you're setting yourself and your story up for success in that it's a full story that now you can make into a campaign or a session. Another sort of pro tip here is that this falls under the realm of like the enemy at hand, so it's worth building out the antagonist goals and who they are. But in any case, we have the main idea, we have an inciting event, and we have somewhat of an obstacle. And now let's think about the ending. And this might be a little confusing based on what I've said in the past. Cutscene kind of to that, me going like, never write an ending to your story. But we shouldn't do that because, it's really done by the players, and you don't want to limit the players in what the ending should be. However, I mean, with this, what's the overall path or channel to the end? And in that, what's the switch that's been flipped narratively and within the characters or the protagonist? And by switch, I mean, what's the transformation or realization that's occurred? I think this is both used for character development and story development, like a plot twist or plot stakes. It's all about showing change, which is good for stories because your character development and your story arc are just that. It's a change. It's a transformation. It's a realization. It's a movement. So stories require that, and more scenes and different types of scenes. Truly, like we need different differentiation, and we need interesting opportunities within story moments. And this is why in movies, and take this with a grain of salt, but like I think when I'm thinking about movies even right now, we rarely see the same location twice. Because the characters go somewhere else. Or if they return to that same scene or that same location, it's with new information, it's with new experiences, it's with new people, it's with less people. Even in this quote, another, pro GM tip, if you think your games are not slow and they're paced really well, I would still dial it up a couple degrees just to make sure. And then watch how your players react, because they will probably be even more interested and involved with a story that has a little bit more movement, a little bit more push to it. And just really a helpful gauge to see how well you're pacing your story right now. So you have to know what you're aiming for in your story to some degree to prepare for the journey and then the end. And based on this, I think it's interesting to start with the opposite of how you want to begin is really where you want to end. So an example is that you want to end with this massive, like cataclysmic, event surrounding the entire city potentially being destroyed. That sort of end. Then the beginning needs to have probably a glorious fruitfulness to the city. Maybe there's never been a crime in the city for the past 15 years, which to our main idea is, that we thought of, it kind of makes sense if people are being brainwashed. So in that, you want to be able to show that change. You want to be able to show it in a unique way. And so that's the same thing with transformation, the twists. The ending doesn't need to feel good. It can feel bad. Heck, I even just ran a one-shot with someone, one person, and it ended not well. Like in a story sense, we all had a good time, and it ended in a way where we could keep going, which, that's fun. But like stories in and of itself, they either end in comedy or they end in tragedy, up or down, good or bad, which we need to care more about how complete does it feel overall, not what emotions are we feeling. I think that's still good to know, like still plan for that. But even if it does end in horror and destruction, because you can see the total transformation played out with those emotions, but it's important to think through how complete, how whole does this story feel. And heck, it might end in really positive emotions, but that's not the definitive answer in or the result of a good story is how it ends positively or negatively. It's how complete is it? So with our idea here again, people in the city are being forced to stay against their will and knowledge. A person or organization wants to help them or for whatever reason and get them out, again, figure out the why here. Then the party gets invited and they need to do some spying on a meeting or a ball or a situation that's happening, in 2 days' time. And after a lot of craziness and more story, a dome covers the city and a massive ritual occurs, maybe attempt to bring full control over the people. And in the end, the players have to decide if they leave behind the world that they were a part of and lose everything, or join in, drink the Kool-Aid, but keep everything they had, but lose the control of their own life. I think that's interesting because I think now we have a crossroad moment for players in the story. And I think crossroad moments are very helpful in teeing up the end and allowing them to make the call and not forcing the players to be one way or the other. But I think that really helps lay the definitive lines of where they're landing and where and who side are they going to be on. Ooh, I think that's really interesting, actually. So, already we have a lot of progress to a simple idea. Again, is it going to be good? Probably not, because we're spending 15, 20 minutes on this already, and we probably need some more time. But I think it's the overall thought process is what we're practicing here. And I think it's, we have one more step into diving into this a little bit more. And the last one is, at this point, it's about adding flavor into your idea and now story. And this is how to accurately, depict and describe the idea from picture form to like a full rendered world. And what does the area and the environment that the idea and the story lives in, what's it feel like? What's it look like? Are there any elements that will boost the idea experientially? In my mind, it's like, let's get a map of the city. Let's get some, good ideas around shops and NPCs. I mean, another idea is, and I've done this before, is that if a player or if all the players have lived in a city their whole life, then they're going to know a lot of people and they're going to have a lot of experiences here, which can be fun to give them 5 NPCs they know. And maybe they're the ones that give you those NPCs. GM. Maybe you give each player one piece of info that makes them question a lot of what's happening in the city already. Or just like a piece of information that they can have and bring to the table thematically that none of the other players know. So for our idea here, it's taking this city and knowing where things are, how they look, what's the smell in the air, down to what are the clothes that people wear, what's the culture like, are there mountains high in the sky outside of the city, can those be seen, is there nothing, is there a volcano, I don't know, is it raining a lot? Now, of course, this is just purely extra. It's not 100% necessary. However, here's my case here. A movie that's in black and white, is felt differently than a movie in color. Positive or negative, whatever you want to say. Or same thing with a low resolution. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. A low resolution versus a high resolution. You can see and feel details differently based on a low versus high, right? And from a practical sense, just do as much as you want or what makes you happy or what you enjoy for your story. And for me, depending on the time frame of the campaign or the session, I focus on intentional details that connect to the main story versus anything that's additionally, for flavor. So if maybe in our idea here, the Capitol building is a primary location of the story, right? Then I'll make sure to know, I don't know, the windows, what they look like or what the guards wear. That's probably what the guards wear outside, maybe like the overall blueprint of the building, and then I'll improv everything else that comes up based on the character's desires, So what we're hitting at here a little bit is world building, which is a whole nother topic that can feel overwhelming. I'm not really trying to hit on that. It's a whole different thing. We'll talk about that in the future with different podcasts, which I'm super excited about. But what we're focusing on now and the questions that we have, is around how do we just, put a little cherry on top of this story Sunday, if you will. Just like find small pieces that can enhance the overall picture you're painting with your party. But I would also say on the pendulum swing, don't take it for granted. Anytime I've done shorts amount of this for my campaigns or sessions, I always feel like, man, I wish I would have added just a little bit more detail to certain parts. So either learn from your own mistakes, learn from mine, or do whatever you want. Well, I hope this week you can find a great idea for your story and build it to become a huge story that will be experienced and truly remembered forever within your friends and your family or just people you're playing D&D with. If you're having trouble with any of this or you need support in any way, please message me on Instagram and TikTok at GM Smudge. And for GMs out there, I have a huge help and love for you. So I want to help you as much as I can. And when it comes to giving you inspiration for your stories, because I know how hard it can be to just kind of come up with different thoughts and ideas, and what me and my co-writer, we're calling it the Inspiration Vault. It's a free downloadable PDF in various editions that focuses on different aspects of the game. And we have 2 editions thus far. One edition is the Dungeons editions, for dungeon-based stories, and a session edition for session/scene support. We've got 20 plus various scenes that you can have, which I use literally every time I play, every week, building sessions and playing in my games. So I'll put that down below. Both those links for you. Again, it's free, it's easy. Download them, keep it on your desktop or your phone, or print them, whatever you'd like. For everything else, though, to get notified for more of these and any other content that I push, please like, subscribe, hit the bell. Follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so that you can get notified for every episode that drops. And please share. That'd be such a huge support to me. I love this community so much, and we already love each other so well. And it's been such a joy to be able to be welcomed like I have. So please go ahead and share and comment below. How do you turn an idea into a story yourself? What's your method? And is there something that maybe we missed here? What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Love to be able to talk through it, because we all get better at all of this by talking it through, And lastly, make sure to add value to your game so that your game becomes more memorable. See you later.